All right, well, if you've clicked this button, hopefully you're here to listen to the article read to you. So just remember that either during or after you have listened or read the article, you need to make sure that you do the highlighting assignment that goes with it. This is for day 1, and then for day 2, there's a chart and assignment that you'll have to do. So the big thing with this article is we're talking about genocide. And we just finished reading about Anne Frank and the Holocaust, and the Holocaust is considered a genocide. And if this is a new word for you, if you take a look at the definition, okay, on the worksheet or on the article, it says it's a noun, so it's a thing. It says the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. So the genocide of the Jews, the killing of the Jews is considered genocide. And we're going to kind of get into this new unit that discusses that. So the directions are, as you are reading the article, you need to use specific highlighting colors to help you think more deeply about the topic. There's yellow. You're going to highlight anything that talks about who is being attacked. Blue, what happened to Zahidullah Rahim and his village. In pink, where the survivors of the attack are living now and what are their lives like. And in green, what horrific acts were done upon the Rohingya. All right, so here we go. Genocide in Myanmar. The UN now says Myanmar's brutal campaign against the Rohingya last year was genocide. Will those responsible be brought to justice? This was written November 19th, 2018. So I heard a lot of people in my class talking about that the Holocaust was, 80 years ago? Genocide happened 80 years ago, which really is not long at all. But now we're only going back to 2018. What in the world? Why is this still happening? So warning, this article contains graphic descriptions of abuse, just as an FYI. The village in western Myanmar where Zahidullah Rahim lived until last year is gone. The road is now lined with charred palm trees and the burnt remains of mosques. Tropical vines grow over what is left of the scorched foundations where homes once stood. Rahim, a member of the oppressed Rohingya minority, once hoped to become a lawyer and represent his people. Now he lives in a refugee camp in neighboring Bangladesh. This sounds really, really interesting. Remember, Anne had these big, big hopes, and obviously because of the Holocaust, she wasn't able to fulfill those hopes and dreams. And now we have Rahim, who wanted to be a lawyer, but because he is part of the Rohingya minority, so a group of people, now this person is no longer feeling that they can become that lawyer right now. Everything has disappeared, Rahim says, even my dreams. Rahim is one of more than 700,000 Rohingya who fled Myanmar in 2017 amid a frenzy of killing, rape, and arson by soldiers and Buddhist mobs. More than a year later, no one has been held accountable for the violence. So I think this is really, really interesting that more than 700,000 Rohingyas, this minority group, fled Myanmar in 2017. And even after this, a year later, nobody has been held accountable for these 700,000 deaths. The Rohingya are a minority Muslim group from Myanmar that have long been persecuted by the majority population, which is Buddhist. The Rohingya have lived in Myanmar's Rakhine state for centuries, long before the country gained independence from the British in 1948. Myanmar's military leaders deny responsibility for the 2017 violence, but the international community is trying to hold them to account. In August, the United Nations released a report calling the campaign against the Rohingya a genocide and saying Myanmar's top military leaders should be tried for crimes against humanity at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. The report is an enormous deal, says Brad Adams of Human Rights Watch, a human rights group. It is the only official UN account of what happened, and all UN member states have to take note of it. So people are trying to deny that this genocide occurred, but the UN now is stepping in and saying, absolutely not. Okay, we need to make sure that we are talking about what happened. You can kind of take a look at the map that's there for you, just so you are aware of what's happening. Mass killings and destroyed villages. The UN report estimates that at least 10,000 Rohingya were killed in violence, and cities harboring eyewitness accounts of mass killings, gang rapes of women and young girls, and the wholesale destruction of villages by the military. The findings are based on 875 interviews, along with documents compiled in field missions to Bangladesh and neighboring countries. So they're getting all of these documents, all of these interviews to prove that this has happened. Only verified and corroborated information was relied upon, the report states. Survivors now living in refugee camps in Bangladesh describe similar horrors. They slaughtered my husband in front of me and my kids, says Mustafa Khatun, 25, who fled Myanmar last August after she herself was bound with rope and raped as her children watched. The hatred in Myanmar between the Rohingya and the majority Buddhist population goes back to World War II. The Rohingya fought with the Allies while the Buddhists sided with the occupying Japanese. After the Allies won, the Rohingya hoped to be rewarded with independence, but that didn't happen. Instead, leaders of the newly independent Burma, which is Myanmar's name before 1989, began blaming the Rohingya for the country's problems, claiming they were illegal migrants from Bangladesh and stripping them of their rights. They have been denied citizenship since 1982. They aren't allowed to move around the country freely and have no access to government services like education and healthcare. You guys, this sounds super, super similar to World War II, the targeting of Jewish people, and it's claims, it's blaming, okay? And they're not allowed to do a lot of these things. How in the world is this still happening? The longtime persecution eventually fueled a Rohingya militant movement. Those militants staged attacks on Myanmar military outposts in August 2017, sparking the violence that caused so many to flee. Reason for hope. The current government of Myanmar is composed of a combination of military and civilian leadership. Myanmar's civilian leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, has been sharply criticized for failing to speak out against the military for its role in the attacks. Suu Kyi, a longtime democracy advocate who was once held under house arrest by the military, won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991, and many in the international community expected her to come swiftly to the defense of the Rohingya. Okay, so remember, this is a civilian leader, and they're thinking that the civilian leader would come and help the Rohingya. Despite Suu Kyi's inaction, human rights advocates see some reason for hope in the UN report. The report calls for an international effort to preserve evidence of the atrocities for possible future prosecution. Myanmar didn't sign on to the agreement that created the International Criminal Court, so it's unlikely those responsible will be brought to trial in the near term. But gathering evidence keeps the door open for justice in the future, says Adams of Human Rights Watch. Once the evidence is gathered, he says, it will become fairly irresistible to use it to persecute those responsible. So I want you to just really quickly think about this whole entire article. It's pretty heavy in all of its thought process. Remember, you need to go through and do the four colors. So like, who was being attacked? You would highlight that in yellow. What happened to Zahidullah Rahim and his village? That's in blue. Where are the survivors of the attack? Where are they living now? And then what are their lives like? Remember, think of Zahidullah Rahim, and he wanted to be a lawyer, right? But that's just one instance. Where are other people? And then in green, what horrific acts were done upon the Rohingya? So all of these things, the big picture of this is all of these atrocities, there's one of your words, happened to these people due to blame, due to things that people were trying to say that they did, but nobody is being held accountable. Nobody's being punished for 700,000 deaths. So go through, do your highlighting, and then once you've done that, day 2 will be the chart, and that's underneath the reading. Hope that makes sense.